Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. I hope you are doing well. It is sunny here, which is exciting. It's been rainy for the last, weeks, things like that. We are also coming out of flu taking over my house. So hopefully one is back at school today. One is doing pretty well today. Oh, hopefully we are like getting this year's flu behind us and moving on forward. And wow, I hope none of you catch the flu. It took my kiddos out substantially over the last 9 days. What I want to chat about today, I've been thinking about developing some like supports and getting lots of questions about, or like, how do we decide what graph type we should use? Okay, so our students are collecting data for science fair, for their in-class lessons, for you have it in your curriculum, all different ways. And they love the good old bar chart. But, and we know they shouldn't use bar charts every time. So the question then becomes like, well, so how can we help them do that? How can we help them figure out when to use the bar chart, not just always defaulting to the bar chart? And as we've talked about, right? Like they make bar charts, they make these graphs of frequency of occurrence in bars, often by categories, starting from kindergarten on. So in some ways, it is great that our students love the bar chart because it means they've built that mental model of data. I'm comparing. I should use a bar chart. But the small hiccup comes when they are, in fact, not looking at categories, but they are maybe looking at a number line. So with our pictographs or our line plot, oh wow, that's so awful with the light. Our line plots, things like that, when we have a number across the bottom as opposed to categories across the bottom, then we don't want a bar chart because this is to compare categories. But there are a lot of other ways that we can compare things. We can compare the distribution across things, and then maybe a box plot is a really good idea. Hint, hint, as opposed to the bar chart. As you all know, I'm a big fan of the box plot. And or maybe we're comparing across space, and therefore we want a map to help our students make that comparison. A bar chart isn't going to help us as much as a map if there's some spatial components to our data. Or maybe we are comparing how two numbers change in relation to one another, or maybe there's a third, right? And for our high school students, we're adding into the bubble chart of the scatter plot. We're building on the scatter plot with that. And so then the question becomes, okay, great. So we all know it's not just the bar chart. We all know that there are these certain instances when we want to be making comparisons or looking for patterns or trends that aren't just comparing across categories that the bar chart lends itself to. But then it comes down to, how do I do this? And why does Google Sheets Chart Wizard spit out things that are not in relation to what I am looking to do with my data? Well, more on that piece later. We're going to talk about that in the coming week. But this, like, how do we think about of all of our different graph types? I've got all these sticky notes all over my desk. It looks like Pepto-Bismol has erupted graph types all over my desk. It comes back to our question. And this is why it's really important to, one, use as much context, rich, authentic, real world data that we can, because the visualization we use is dependent upon the question that we have. If we are asking a composition question or a how do individual parts compare to the whole, then we want to be using our circle graph or our pie chart. Or maybe we want to be using how do different counties compare to the whole? Great. Then we're asking a question about the parts of the whole. If we're asking a question about how do one county compare to another county, large versus small, rural versus urban, then we've got a category. So then we're doing a comparison question. And then again, we might want this graph type. Are you seeing what I'm getting at here? Is that it's not a black or white, yes, no dichotomous key when it comes to our graph types because it depends on what we're asking. We can use our map. This is called the chloropleth map, which is just a really funny word that we don't use in any other space. And it makes me giggle every time I say it. Well, but it's just the regions are shaded in by a category or by a numeric value for that geographic region. We talked about this a bit. I think it was back in January or February when I was chatting with you all about maps and things like that. But this map type can be used in different contexts depending on what we are asking and what we are trying to get at. We can also ask, so that was comparison questions. We have composition questions. We can also ask questions that are like, about overall, what are the range of our values? What is the center? What is the mode as one of our centers? Like, what's the most common value? We can ask things like, how long does it take us to get to school across our whole group? And we can think about, well, what is the mode or what is typical of our group by maybe the median, or if the data are normally distributed, then we can get at the mean. So then we're asking what in essence is it's a distribution. It's a how do all the values relate to one another? And then we want to use things like our line graphs with our numbers along the bottom, because that is going to help us see kind of how are we as a full group distributed across that variable or attribute. So we can ask comparisons over space. We can ask comparisons over time. And I'm not finding a line graph. A line graph. We can ask comparisons over time. We can ask comparisons across two different variables. We can ask composition of the parts of the whole, of across space, different things like that. We can ask distributions across our numbers and looking at the spread. We can even do a distribution and then a comparison between categories, right? But it all comes back to what questions are we asking? So we've linked in the, like, I'll link below a resource on where am I getting all these graph icons? Where are they coming from? What am I talking about? A resource of those different graph types. It's our graph type matrix activity. It's free. Please use it. We've got it grade leveled by elementary, middle, early high school, and then advanced high school and early undergraduate, post-secondary, of how we can think about which of these graph types, one, are developmentally appropriate, and then how do they relate to the different question types that we are asking. And we are so excited to share that with you. And we are so excited because we are building out more resources about this, about graph types and how to make the graph types and how to think about which graph type to use. More of that to come. We are working behind the scenes and so excited to get that to you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday and week. And I wish you all good health and that the flu does not come to you the way it has taken over my house.